the night of February 18, 2009, the air around Dublin's Coombe district was heavy with drizzle. Inside Grumpy Jack's, a local pub tucked between the narrow streets, the atmosphere was deceptively ordinary. Pints clinked against wood, football played faintly on the television, and regulars gathered in their usual corners. Among them was John Champagne Carroll, a man whose name had long been whispered in the city's underworld and who was related to drugs godfather George Mitchell. Carroll, 33 years old, carried himself with a quiet confidence that came from years of dealing in the shadows of Dublin's booming drug trade. Gardaí knew him as a player, someone who moved with serious criminals, someone with money, connections, and enemies. And enemies were everywhere. What Carroll didn't know that evening was that as he sat chatting in Grumpy Jack's, his death warrant had already been signed. Around 9:30 p.m, a motorbike pulled up outside and the passenger, wearing a helmet, went inside. Witnesses later recalled his expressionless face, his calm movements. He wasn't there for a drink. The gun was already in his hand as he immediately identified Carroll. What followed was sudden, chaotic, and terrifying. Carroll darted across the pub in an attempt to escape, but was shot multiple times at point-blank range. Screams ripped through the bar as drinkers dived to the floor, pints and glass exploding around them. The gunman fled into the night, leaving behind shattered glass, blood on the wooden floorboards, and a community frozen in shock. In the dark underbelly of Dublin's south side, one name carried fear and notoriety: Christopher Git Zambra. To some, he was just another street criminal from Drimnagh. To others, he was a ruthless operator who clawed his way into the city's most dangerous ranks. Zambra's early life told a different story. He once pulled on the green jersey, playing football for Ireland in his youth. He even nurtured dreams of a music career, writing Cat Stevens-inspired songs and promoting them online. But those ambitions were soon buried under a darker reality. The young hopeful became a hardened armed robber, then one of Dublin's most notorious drug traffickers, a man whose name was whispered in connection with murder. Zambra's story began like so many others born into Dublin's criminal heartlands: small jobs, street fights, and low-level drug dealing. But he wasn't content with scraps. He had ambition, connections, and a willingness to use violence when it suited him. Those qualities made him valuable and dangerous. By the early 2000s, Dublin was gripped by the crumbling Drimnagh feud, a bloody war between rival gangs that left bodies in the streets and fear in the air. Zambra thrived in that chaos. He forged alliances, traded in drugs, and built a reputation as someone who couldn't be intimidated. Garda intelligence files linked him to shipments of narcotics, violent assaults, and suspected contract hits. His name started appearing in whispered conversations in pubs and on street corners. His reputation grew. Zambra was feared, but also respected. The whispers on the street said he had money, connections, and protection from some of the city's most dangerous criminals. Gardaí linked him to drugs, weapons, and suspected contract killings. Git Zambra was someone you didn't cross. By the late 2000s, Christopher Git Zambra's name was drifting across Garda intelligence files with increasing regularity. He wasn't just suspected of drug dealing or street-level violence anymore. Detectives believed his fingerprints, figuratively at least, were all over a series of bloody killings that shocked Dublin's south side. The first came in October 2007, when Brian Downs, a garage owner in Walkinstown, was gunned down in cold blood. Downs was no ordinary mechanic. Gardaí suspected he had deep ties to criminal money, fronting business ventures that blurred the line between legitimate trade and gangland finance. When he was cut down at his own premises, it looked less like random violence and more like an execution. Caught in the crossfire the same day was Edward Ward, just 26 years old, a worker at Downs' garage. Ward wasn't part of the underworld. He was an innocent man who happened to be there when the bullets started flying. His murder underlined the ruthlessness of Dublin's gangland. No witnesses, no loose ends. Just weeks later, in November 2007, another figure with links to Downs was killed. Sean McMahon, a businessman in Talla, was shot dead in his own home. Gardaí believed McMahon had been connected to laundering money for Zambra's operations and that a financial deal had spiraled fatally out of control. The theory was simple and chilling. Money went missing, trust evaporated, and McMahon paid the price with his life. The cycle of killings didn't stop there. In March 2008, John Burney, a 29-year-old father of 4, was murdered at his house in Newcastle, West Dublin. The attack bore the same hallmarks: a professional hit, efficient and merciless. Garda sources whispered that the same hitman had been used across several of these killings, a gun for hire with Zambra somewhere in the shadows pulling strings. 4 men dead in less than 6 months, 2 of them known criminals, 1 alleged money launderer, 1 an innocent bystander. Different lives, different worlds, but all tied together in Garda files by one name: Christopher Git Zambra. None of these suspicions were ever proven in court, but to investigators, the pattern was unmistakable. Zambra wasn't just surviving in Dublin's underworld, he was thriving in it, his reach stretching from drug shipments to suspected contract killings. And with every fresh body on the streets, his reputation grew darker, more feared, and more dangerous. In February 2009, Dublin's underworld was shaken when John Champagne Carroll was gunned down inside Grumpy Jack's pub in the Coombe. At the time of his death, Carroll carried a handwritten list of debts, nearly €250,000 owed to him by criminals. To investigators, the document looked like a death warrant. The killing quickly spiraled into one of the most controversial gangland trials in Irish history. Carroll was said to have been targeted after rumours spread that he had become involved with the former girlfriend of a powerful gangster. In the weeks before his death, he had been so paranoid about the threats against him that he avoided staying at his own home, instead moving between hotels for safety. When the ambush finally came, it was brutal and calculated. 4 men were eventually charged in connection with Carroll's murder. Of those, only one, 29-year-old gunman Peter Kenny, was convicted, his fate sealed by the testimony of state witness Joey O'Brien, who later entered the witness protection program. Garda intelligence suggested Carroll may have been betrayed by some of his closest associates. Investigators believed he was set up, and whispers from the underworld pointed towards Christopher Git Zambra as the man suspected of orchestrating the hit. The prosecution's case hinged on the testimony of drug dealer Joey O'Brien, who claimed he had met with Christopher Zambra and others in the days leading up to Carroll's murder. According to O'Brien, the killing was planned during these meetings, with Zambra allegedly offering €30,000 for the hit. He said Zambra asked him to secure a motorbike for the job and to arrange for it to be burned afterwards. O'Brien openly admitted his own involvement in the plot, but was never charged. Instead, he was granted a form of immunity, testifying under the assurance that his words could not be used against him. Today he lives under witness protection, far from Dublin. But despite his dramatic claims, the case quickly unravelled. Under cross-examination, O'Brien's credibility collapsed, his story shredded by the defence. After years of trials and retrials, the outcome was clear. In 2013, Christopher Zambra walked free. The acquittal reinforced his image as a man beyond the reach of the law, untouchable in the eyes of many. Yet in the shadows, suspicion lingered that Zambra remained deeply entangled in the violent web of Dublin's gangland. By 2014, Christopher Zambra was no longer the untouchable figure he once seemed. His world was crumbling, rivals were circling, allies were turning their backs, and whispers of lost money and unpaid debt spread through the underworld. In Dublin's gangland, weakness of that kind was a death sentence. With his name linked to 5 murders, Zambra knew the walls were closing in. Paranoia gripped him, and he went to extraordinary lengths to stay one step ahead. From a Dublin dealership, he purchased 2 identical black BMWs, requesting that their license plates differ by just a single digit. His plan was simple. One car could act as a decoy while he slipped away in the other. Every moment was calculated. A motorbike scout always rode ahead to check the streets, ensuring the coast was clear. A small convoy shadowed him, scoping out destinations before he arrived, making sure there were no surprises. Zambra lived in constant fear. yet clung to the belief that with enough caution and deception, he could outwit those who wanted him dead. On May 4, 2014, despite all his elaborate precautions, Christopher Zambra's luck finally ran out. The 37-year-old was tailed as he drove from his home on Galtimore Road to his sister's house on nearby Cooley Road. It was just before 3 in the afternoon, and he had no idea that his killers were already closing in. As he pulled up outside, a Nissan Qashqai drew alongside his Audi. In an instant, the quiet street erupted into violence. An assassin leaned out of the rear window and unleashed a volley of 7 shots. Zambra slumped across the passenger seat, but managed to claw his way out of the car, staggering down the path in a desperate bid to escape. The gunman pursued him, catching up near his sister's home. Neighbours looked on in horror as the 2 men grappled, Zambra fighting for his life despite his wounds. The struggle ended brutally. The assassin held him over a garden fence, pulled out a second weapon, and fired again, before returning to the getaway car. Zambra collapsed in the garden, bullets tearing through his chest, blood soaking into the grass. By the time Gardaí arrived at 3:02 p.m, the street was in chaos. Family members had rushed out, screaming in desperation, while Zambra's niece knelt beside him in the garden, clutching his hand as his life slipped away. Neighbours stood frozen as the quiet Drimnagh Road filled with the echo of gunfire. Zambra was pronounced dead at the scene. The post-mortem later confirmed what was already clear. Catastrophic chest injuries from multiple gunshot wounds had ended his life. The killers vanished with chilling precision. Their getaway car, the Nissan Qashqai, was soon discovered burnt out on nearby Bedmadigan Road. Inside lay 2 weapons, a 9mm pistol and a .38 revolver, both fire damaged beyond recognition, stripped of any forensic clues. In the aftermath, Gardaí also found a gun hidden in Zambra's own Audi, suggesting he knew better than most the danger closing in around him. CCTV footage revealed what detectives had feared. Zambra had been followed that day, shadowed from the moment he left his home. Every move tracked until the ambush outside his sister's door. The investigation that followed was vast. More than 250 lines of inquiry and 190 witness statements pursued. Yet despite the scale of the effort, everything about the murder pointed to a carefully planned gangland hit. Efficient, ruthless, and mercilessly final. In the months leading up to his death, Christopher Zambra had made powerful enemies, and Gardaí pursued several live lines of inquiry into who ordered his assassination. At the top of the list was the real IRA. Detectives believed dissident Republicans blamed one of Zambra's associates for the murder of their leader Alan Ryan in 2012. Ryan, who had been shot dead on Dublin's north side, had tried to force crime gangs to hand over a cut of their racketeering and drug profits. Gardaí could not rule out that Ryan's allies sought revenge through Zambra's killing. Another theory pointed to the fallout from the murder of John Champagne Carroll. Although Zambra was acquitted in court, detectives remained convinced he had organised the hit, and even his own death may have been retribution. A third line of inquiry focused on a bitter turf war with a major Tallaght drug trafficker, a rival with both motive and means to remove Zambra from the streets. Then there was the possibility of a love rival. Garda sources believed Zambra had been romantically involved with the ex-girlfriend of a jailed gangster, a man notorious for ordering hits on her previous boyfriends. The theory that he orchestrated Zambra's assassination could not be dismissed. Finally, suspicion also fell on one of Zambra's closest allies, Jonathan Gill, better known as Mr. Big. Gill, long suspected of arranging Alan Ryan's murder, was also believed to have turned on Zambra after a major falling out. Zambra had recently lost possession of a large amount of cash under investigation by the Criminal Assets Bureau, and Garda intelligence suggested some of that money belonged to Gill. Their relationship may have ended not in loyalty, but betrayal. 4 months after Zambra's death, Gardaí arrested 2 men as part of the investigation. Yet to this day, no one has ever been convicted of his murder. That was it for today's video. What are your thoughts on today's topic? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel if you'd like to see our next videos.